Welcome to Evolving Waves, where we ride the adversity to reach the shores of success. Today's guest is Pixie Paula, a leader in the spirits market who was a partner in a previous spirits company, and through the lessons she learned, was able to acquire a struggling distillery here in Charleston and has turned it into a thriving hub within the Charleston community and is exceeding most of the other industry spots here in Charleston in a predominantly male dominated industry. Super excited to hear her story. She has gone through a ton of adversity, has learned lots of lessons. One of the coolest people I know. Has a great personality. You're going to love listening to her today. Before we jump in, today's podcast is brought to you by Stinger Branding, a national lead generation focused marketing agency that helps businesses generate an ROI from their marketing efforts, including web design, social media, Google, and more. Learn more about them at stingraybranding.com. Pixie, I'm
Hey,
super excited to do this with you. Welcome.
I figure you knew everything about me by now.
No,
You
we're
know,
diving in deep.
I'll tell you. Somebody said that to me yesterday. They're listening to me talk. I'm like, how do I know you for 20 years? And I didn't even know any of that. And I'm like, no, I've been around a long time. I always joke, but I'm like, I'm always the oldest person in the room. I've been here forever.
Well, and it's funny. The first episode we did was with a guy that I had known since the days that I started the network, like my networking groups here, and he was starting up a gym at the same time, and I had no idea after like we've been friends and have networked and everything else for the last like 12, 13 years now. Found out he was an Olympic athlete, which is what
Wow.
led him into starting his business. And I was like, what? That's crazy. Yeah, he
Yeah,
was like specially recruited by the army and all this other stuff. So you
that's
never know
awesome.
what comes out of these
You never
things.
know.
Cool. I've got some good questions, but I like to kind of start off always with what's your background, right? What led you into this? Who you are? Who is Pixie?
So it's funny because you can talk about what I call the hardware and the software. And the hardware for me is everything you did and the designations and the education and the life experience. And then the software is being able to go internally and knowing who you are inside and being able to identify with what your purpose is on the planet. So they're two separate questions and they're both relative and really they're integrated, right? You can't separate it. So from a very young age, I knew who I was as far as what is my human being doing stepping into the planet. And I had the great gift of being in a family background with a supportive set of parents and grandparents that encouraged me to find out what is my purpose. And so I focused on that from a very young age. I knew that I was here for unconditional love and possibility. And it was less for me about what I created and manifested in the life. Life just is crazy. It's everywhere. You just don't know. You couldn't have predicted half of the things that have happened in the last 10 years alone, let alone, for me, over 6 decades. So I just know that my life is about unconditional love and possibility. How did I get to the business space? I loved education. I loved learning. My mom somebody just told me, your mom showed me a picture of you in like fourth grade making everybody sit in a garage at a desk playing school. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to see that picture. And I do go back to like, I'm an educator, I'm a nurturer. I want to give, I want to share information. And for me to lead is to serve. So I just was a great student. I was fascinated by spirituality and metaphysics from a very young age. I listened to the voice of God, I'll call it for that for me. And just, I was filled and inspired with this source energy that just drove me to learn about everything, which led me to get a lot of educational degrees, to be in love with education and learning. And my spiritual connection was numbers. So I was heavy into math. Like I love calculus. I love learning about sines and cosines and tangents. I loved geometry. For me, it was sacred. The numbers were sacred. And hey, I was born on 6/3/63 at 6:30 in the morning. For me, like the sixes and the threes and the nines, like you paid attention to numbers from a very young age with those kinds of numbers. You're like, this is unusual. So I was in love with the numbers, which led me to being a teacher originally. My background is in gifted education, and I taught for a little bit, but then I was recruited by American Express because I had saved. And I had started saving from when I was a little kid. Every Saturday, my grandfather would give us $2 a dollar to go down to downtown to like go into the five and dime and spend the money. And I didn't. I saved mine. And my dad would always say, the more you give, the more you get. So my siblings might have gone and spent their money on candy, popcorn, and little trinkets. For me, I was always thinking about how do I divide a dollar into 20 nickels so that I could give it away and I could be manifesting more coming in. So I think my brain always worked that way from a money perspective, and I always had a good relationship with money. So therefore, I ended up on Wall Street. I ended up in financial planning. I was one of the first women. I was the only woman in my class to get a stockbroker's license, and I was taking my exam at a Boston sweat lodge. And back in the day, it wasn't online. You filled in the little ovals. You brought in your number two pencil, and that's all you could bring in the door. And then you couldn't even leave to go to the bathroom with a 70% pass fail ratio. Was like you forfeit. And I was sitting in labor taking that test, begged to go to the restroom, and they were like, "You're done. Once you can turn it in, but you can leave." I peed right in that chair to get through that exam, and
What?
I was just
That's
so
crazy.
excited to get my Series 7. It was just so important to me, and so then financial planning and business development became a way of life for me.
Wow, that's incredible. It's an incredible story just to lead to that part, and that's just the beginning of your
Yeah.
journey. Well, so and now you're currently the owner of Strikewood Distillery,
Hmm.
right? And also Skirt Magazine.
Hmm.
Um, as we look back at your path, what are some of the things that led you going through from teaching to Wall Street that you think attributed to you leading into becoming an owner of a distillery?
Sure. So, you know, again, the movement of the universe just kind of, I think, shapes your journey. And if you're along for the ride, you can really embrace every opportunity out there. And I couldn't say no to anything. I became fascinated by real estate and built a lot of what are still today five-star golf resorts, mostly in the Florida area. But I really got excited about building commercial and residential properties. And when I had the opportunity to consult with a technology company actually on the purification of alcohol, which I heavily invested in, I looked at all the books and did the analysis on the industry. And I said, holy cow, I'm over here convincing people to buy cable partnerships and really banging on people's heads saying, hey, analog is going to be a thing of the past. And and now I'm looking at a barrel of bourbon appreciating at 400% a year and being one of the truly only asymmetrical investments in the marketplace. And I'm deciding this is only a real estate play. The more product that you can get onto a product shelf and then get the product pulled off the shelf is how your brand is going to develop. And you get to be hopefully one of the 1% that actually survives in building a brand in the marketplace. It's really tough because of the regulatory issues. It's so highly governmental, governmentally regulated that it makes it a challenge to, you can't make some moonshine and sell it out of your truck. So it's a challenging, probably the most challenging business to be in, honestly. But for me, it's nothing more than an asymmetrical investment. Hey, the longer you don't drink bourbon and the less of it that becomes available, the more valuable it becomes.
Hmm, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Well, it's interesting that you go from financial planning to owning a distillery because financial planning is also a heavily regulated, very
absolutely.
difficult industry to operate
Yes,
in.
yes. And I had so many designations and keeping licenses up. But you know what? That gave me the background practice for what I needed to do in this space, if I think about it. Being Series 7, 6, 63, like going through doing advanced tax strategies for all of my career, those really gave me the business development. And then at one point, I had a legal division of American Express, and tax strategies were my focus. And that gave me the opportunity to look at tons and tons of corporate tax returns to see how they were structured, what mergers and acquisitions look like, what development and manufacturing look like. So I think I came in with a pretty broad base already to step into this space. And once I decided that I wanted to be an investor in this space, I really looked at the point of why, if getting capital is so hard and it's so hard for women. First of all, this industry is really hard. Put women in the middle of this industry, and let's go back. I'm 2005, 2006 before I'm spacing it. The early 2000s where I'm stepping into hospitality. there were very few women in the space that were leaders or direct owners in companies. And it hasn't changed much. When I started, less than one tenth of 1% of distilleries worldwide were owned by women. And now we're at 8%. It's still such a tiny,
Yeah.
tiny, and for breweries, 5 to 8%. So I looked at that as opportunity and I thought, what is worse than the interruption of capital? And in my head, it was the interruption of supply. And most of these brands are not distillery owners. They're just raising millions of dollars for a marketing campaign, right? They don't know the ins and outs. They don't know what they don't know. And so I said, if I'm going to put all this effort into building this brand, let me make sure I'm not going to interrupt my supply. And that's why I knew that at that point that I wanted to have my own distillery.
That makes sense. So as you look at the process of getting into this business, I mean, it's interesting that you talk about how few women are in the industry and how far that has to still go, right? And this industry comes from one that has always been super regulated and has been a kind of a problem industry, right? Because
Yeah.
if you think back to the 20s, right, and beyond, like, you know, within the last century, we had prohibition. So you think to go from that to then opening back up, now becoming a mainstream business industry, right? It's not being produced by the government or it's not like bootleggers and things of that nature. And now the evolution of having women come into it. What are some of those challenges that you tend to face as a woman in the industry?
It's kind of interesting because it parallels the story of the striped pig, which is steeped in history back to 1838. You mentioned prohibition, which most people are familiar with. That didn't work out so well.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to that was the temperance movement, and prior to that was the 15-gallon Act of 1838. So the government, in their infinite wisdom, thought that they would control the consumption of alcohol by using reverse psychology and outpricing the marketplace. So they said, oh, you can buy alcohol, but you have to buy in 15 gallons or more. And they thought, surely no one will be able to afford this. You just won't be drinking. Well, this clever couple from Dedham, Massachusetts came up with the concept of the striped pig as a circus attraction and said, well, we could paint a pig, put it under a tent, and have people pay a sixpence to get into our speakeasy, to get a grog of rum or bourbon or whatever they were serving. And the word spread far and wide that there was this magical pig of great proportions and made you sing and dance and cured all your ailments and illnesses, and you were a happy person. So journalists from far and wide came to see the story of the striped pig, and that storyline spread. It actually spread so far that the government had to step in and seize the pig and do an autopsy on it. And in the guts of the pig and in the brain of the pig, they found ancient scrolls of rum recipes that dated back to the kings and queens. And this farce just kept perpetuating itself. So the striped pig became famous. And I think here we are 300 years later, and this girl from New England is still trying to get people to pay a sixpence to come into the distillery and get a grog of rum and hang around our speakeasy, which you have enjoyed,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's just so we don't come that far. And for women in the space, I mean, when I entered any of the business, it's still hard all the way around. You mentioned Skirt. But Skirt is celebrating its 30th year, is the first women's empowerment magazine. And we recently launched the mini skirt because I said my demographic is still teaching financial literacy to women age 45 to 65, which is our skirt demographic. And they're all struggling. We still know that even with more women entering bigger positions in Fortune 500 companies, they are still reporting that they're late on paying their bills. They're not financially independent. They don't feel the confidence that their male counterparts do. And 90% of women will be 100% alone. So, how do we make them 100% ready? And just like the miracle of compound interest, human valuation is much more important currency than anything else. We've got to get to these young ladies sooner. So, we just launched the mini skirt, and that targets teaching financial literacy and confidence building, really the four cornerstones of making them well rounded and giving them real world practice to start networking, developing their business or professional ideas early. And the schools touch on these things, but they don't They don't have real live business experience. We throw these girls into the middle of these tenured women who want to big sister, little sister, skirt sister with them, be part of this greater skirt sisterhood. And we can literally change the business acumen of our greater community. So we're going to be getting a proclamation day on August 17th. I am creating the Spirit of Giving nonprofit palooza. It'll be at the Striped Pig Distillery, and it'll be the first time ever that we had the largest gathering of nonprofits in one building on one day under one roof. And we're really excited about that. So we hope to have over 50 nonprofits gather together, share and educate our community. You get to go and you get to see every nonprofit in the community and say, I resonate with this one. I want to work for this one. I want to volunteer for this one. I want to make a donation over here. I didn't know these resources existed. So the community can benefit by really being able to have one arena for all this nonprofit. And the nonprofits benefit because they can learn how to strategize and cross collaborate with each other to reinforce whatever their initiatives are. So
That's awesome.
I'm so excited about it.
That's incredible. Yeah, and I think we can all agree that the world would be a better place with more women businesses in it. That's for sure. I know most of the women I know that are in business certainly contribute lots of value to our community, and uh, usually they're pretty well run companies. They're pretty well and they're ready to go.
Yeah.
Um,
And
as,
that's so I say we're not creating spirits, Ellen. We're creating inspiration.
so as we kind of go back to your process of getting involved with Straight Pig, was that the first venture that you had within the Straight community?
Okay, so I came in, like I said, as an investor, started doing the research, fell in love with the industry. But I had a mentor, and he said to me, did it ever occur to you that you were meant to come into the spirit space to change the industry? And I was like, no, I put ice in my red wine and I really don't drink. So it was so far fetched for me that I would end up in this space. And who knew this brilliant man? He knew, he somehow knew that I was meant to come in and change the space. So I obviously am still thinking about it because it turned out that that was a vision, whatever. What are you foreshadowing? And I lived into that. But what happened first is I had a dream. And in the dream, I was told to create this company called Local Choice and to launch what we call today our Sip and Share initiative. And that I would create brand loyalty and develop a platform for women, diversity, people to step on to a platform that wanted the chance to share their voice, which was being cut out of the industry. Many industries, especially back then, you're talking 2005, 2006, the iPhone hadn't even been invented yet. And so fast forward, I'm engaged in the most lucrative industry on the planet, truly a liquid asset investment. And I have this dream. So I woke up and I called my attorney and I told her that I'm like, okay, I'm going to give away $2 a bottle for any product that we sell in conjunction with a community education program or a nonprofit event. We're going to call it, at the time I was calling it Pour It Forward. We now call it Sip and Share. And we're going to build brand loyalty by doing greater things and having conversations around spirits that would never have been had before. She's like, oh my God, you're going to be so rich. And I was like, great, because I'm going to give it all away. She's like, you're going to do what now? I'm like, I'm going to give it away. I mean, in the instructions, I am about, right, remember back to with my dad, the more you give, the more you get. I said, we're truly going to pour it forward. I said, let's not argue Jesus turned water into wine at the face of Canaan. Like, I am going to create inspiration around spirits for the multitudes. We know that you've been to, I'm sure, a nonprofit event or a gala where you pay $250 to get in a black tie and go to a big old affair, right? In the name of
Mm-hmm.
charity, you do it because it's their annual fundraiser. A lot of these nonprofits, they have one big annual fundraiser. They're doing fundraising all year long, but they have one big drive, right? And
Yep.
we go and we support it. We get out of the car and we go to the bar, right?
Yep.
You get your first
First place you
cocktail.
go.
First place you go.
Immediately.
Immediately. And in the dream, I'm like, no one's leveraging the bar. No one's leveraging the bar. So the bar becomes almost like a 401k matching program to everything that's happening. And in some states, and at the time, It's still kind of this way. South Carolina doesn't allow giving away free alcohol, no donation. There's no such thing as donating alcohol. Somebody has to pay. The tax entities want their tax revenue, right? So it's challenging. It's not like I can just make alcohol and give it away for free. I still have to pay a federal excise tax and the state taxes, retail taxes. You have to still go through the process and the channels to be able to donate. So you're really just buying the gift for this entity, whatever the nonprofit is. And I said, if we could teach them to work with us, we is it cheaper marketing with the $2 bottle than going what you have to do to acquire a client and compete in the most highly regulated and
Yeah.
such competitiveness in this space only because it's so capital intensive, right? So very few people can be successful in this space for those reasons. So we're leveraging the bar and being true to the dream. I'm just being obedient. But that's what gives me my passion behind my purpose. My purpose is, as we mentioned before, unconditional love, possibility.
It's incredible. That's the different initiatives that you've come up with in um, marketing and growing this brand and getting it infused in the local community has been fun to watch. And it's, I hope that some others in the industry will take, take in what you're doing and hopefully replicate it, and utilize it to continue to grow space, especially the women-owned ones.
I would encourage every business to somehow partner with a cause marketing campaign. When cause marketing turns into cause commerce, everybody wins, including the investors. And you're exchanging there's a direct exchange before you're paying for marketing that you don't know is going to work or not work, right? It's a after the sale opportunity. We some people could say this is a vice industry, but I would suggest that gambling is a vice industry. But most states, it took them a while, especially the conservative states, but they came around to legalizing gambling through the state lottery by shifting those proceeds back to funding the state education budget. And so that's the same with that I'm doing is I am not going to control people's alcohol consumption. And for those that abuse, there's abusers in every industry. I cannot control that. What I can do is be in the middle of a multi-trillion dollar industry and shift those dollars back to the communities
Absolutely.
so that while they're having a cocktail, they are putting up a playground or they are building a church. I can do that.
That's incredible. And that's what, I mean, ultimately, that's what small business is about, right? It's about providing something that can benefit the community. And most people just think about the surface level service that they go into business to offer. But for, how you can drive that additional impact. It's funny that you mentioned that. This morning on the way in, I was thinking we're getting ready to launch a new website here in Charleston, new North Charleston tourism website. And I was thinking through the monthly revenue is going to come in from being listed on that site and featured and stuff. And I was thinking, man, we could get like 5% of that or 10% of those revenues back to the North Charleston Chambers Foundation and North Charleston nonprofits to help drive in more resources to help improve the city that we're all promoting. And I think it goes back to that. Like you've got to have more cause than just the service, right? And like one of our things that we focus on at Stingray is our is the 97% of businesses that fail, and how do we drive that number down, right? And most of the time, people mess up in one of four areas, right? It's either they don't know how to generate revenue, they don't know how to manage their cash flow, the legal issues, or tax issues, right? It's getting your marketing fixed, knowing how to manage the money that comes in, taking care of your staff, and then making sure you're following all the regulatory and the things you got to do as a business owner. So I think that having a cause and a purpose tied to what you're doing more than just I need to go make some money really makes everything else tick. As you kind of go back to the early days of you taking over Strike Pig, what were some of the challenges that you faced and maybe some of the lessons that you learned in going through those that you utilize now that help the significant growth and awareness that you have raised now for Strike Pig?
So my parent company is called Local Tree Spirits, which was founded first. And I mentioned I went into branding and then I said, if I'm going to be successful at that, I want to be the one sitting at the board table making the decisions. I don't want my supply interrupted. Um, it was a great opportunity to be able to acquire Straight Pig. The biggest challenge, which is still today the biggest challenge, especially if you're a successful entrepreneur, is raising capital. And so coming in, I've always had to be creative because no matter what you hear, capital is not readily available for females. Now take single women with children who might even be pregnant, who have not been in the employment job force for a while, and throw them into some creative business idea and expect somebody to hand them over millions of dollars. So I had always had to be creative with stepping into any business that I had and proving and structuring a deal that said, I'm going to be able to do X. And if I do X, then I get Y and Z. Because expecting them to just hand over the capital and the reins just is not a reality for most women. So I had to be really very good and keen at structuring good negotiated contracts that were ironclad, that if I performed, I would be able to get my reward. And that's how I've had to structure a lot of deals. It's still how I structure today. Now, if you can do that, the sky is the limit because look, no one's pumping the dollar in from Mars. It doesn't fall out of trees. It's, there's all the money that exists in the world is already here. We're just, it's energy flow. And your relationship with money really dictates how you can manage and make money. So that challenge of having capital has to be overcome by figuring out how you will negotiate the fact that the capital already exists. Now, it's a lot of hard work, especially in manufacturing. So, never as a financial advisor would I advise somebody to go into manufacturing and try to operate out of cash flow. It's insanity. But I knew the end game. I had the experience, I had the relationships, and I have that passion. Like I know my purpose so clearly that I bought into what my mentor had told me that I'm here to change the world. So it's corny, but it's like you don't know what my God could do kind of thing, right? I'm like walking in this faithful space of I was meant to do this. So do I cry every day? I sure do. Sometimes I cry for half an hour when I go to bed. Do I have to structure and manage myself and my internal dialogue? Non-stop. But I also feel so empowered that if I don't do this, why was I chosen to do this? In the beginning, Ellen, like 15 years ago, I was so worried. Like when I first had the dream, I was like, oh my God, what if everybody's gonna have this dream? Like, how am I gonna make this happen? Is it gonna be taken away from me? I can't get enough money fast enough. I'm gonna lose the opportunity. And I'm like, all right, we're 15 years in. No one has taken the opportunity. No one is leading with this space. If I can get and compel $1 trillion alcohol industry to follow suit and do what I'm doing, then it's less about me and the striped pig or local choice or skirt or any of it. It's more about the fact that we are moving all those dollars and shifting them back to our community. So the striped pig, we want to become the entertainment hub of the South. I just finished completing another capital raise for almost $1.5 million. And we are redesigning that 24,000 square foot event space so that we provide the space for people to come to have their nonprofit fundraisers. You don't have to be trying to find somewhere to go, to throw your event. We become the hub where you have a nonprofit event. Come on over and let's leverage the bar again. We just did our third year of Tri-County Veterans. And the first year was like, we're going to raise 30,000. Second year, we're going to raise 50,000. This year, we're going to raise 100,000. You're talking in one night between driving the bar, the entertainment. My kids, family run business. They even donate their tips. Like everybody can come together with a code for the community to buy some spirits, and that sip and share goes back to that nonprofit. So there's so much drive to coming back into working together. That's a big struggle. The uniting community. Second, getting that capital. And I would tell you for the rest of my life, I'm going to be considered a startup when you look at me. Because if you're successful, you're reaching bigger. Every time you're reaching bigger, you need more capital to finance big, big, big dreams. You don't if you're operating out of cash flow and you're not really you're status quo. But I don't do that very well. I reach really high. And then I finally said to myself, there's no way I can do this out of cash flow. So now I'm presenting my story And what am I considered? A startup. I mean, I'm a mid-tier company that just got the award for Inc., fastest growing top 25 companies in the Southeast, whatever something it was. And then the same with South Carolina, fastest growing companies. And I'm still going to
That's
be looked
incredible.
at as a startup because I'm saying, hey, I have a new dream. I want to redesign a 24,000 square foot event space for an entertainment hub for our community. And people are like, well, how's that going to work? Right. So it's still a new initiative. So no matter how much I've been around, I'm a startup. This new dream is a startup.
That's incredible. Well, and some of the things that you mentioned, I think that are kind of underlying lessons or more character traits that you employ that are on some of that success is work ethic, right? And I think that's one thing that a lot of business owners and a lot of people that come into business really don't understand, right? It's everyone sees the success, they don't see the 3 years of 18-hour days and crying, right?
Three
And the
years?
frustrations
Three?
and one, yeah, and I mean, technically, within the first 10, you can have a
Yeah.
7% failure rate, right? So you got to get through that
Yeah.
first 10 to even be able to be considered as one of those top tier businesses.
Yes.
Um, and then collaboration is a lot of what you're doing, and I think that's something you're starting to hear that word more in the business space. And there's so much power behind it, right?
It takes a
So
village.
much power behind
Absolutely.
it.
There's an old African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, you better darn well go together. And it just, people are so into themselves and concerned for good reasons. A lot of bad people stab people in the back. So, they've come to be hurt, they've come to be betrayed. And it's hard for people to recover. I mean, I have been betrayed more times than I can count. And it is so hard to recover. My greatest prayer is always, dear God, please don't let it change me. And like I said, I would still cry myself to sleep at night because I can't understand the betrayal. But I can understand my purpose. Unconditional love is the first part. And so if I'm going to practice my purpose, then I have to be praying for my enemies. I have to be really working for the benefit of those who operate in such horrific ways that they were either damaged, they don't know any better, or they're operating out of fear. So
Mhm.
filtering through all that, putting in the sweat equity, the sweat equity right there, and it is nonstop. You cannot take your foot off the pedal, and especially for women. And I worry about this. I don't see much progress, honestly. I really don't. So I'm hopeful that by getting the visibility that we need coming up into play here and having stuck it out for all of these decades. I mean, I started my first business when I was 9. So we're talking a lot of decades here of being an entrepreneur.
Like two,
9. Oh, you think it was earlier? Yeah.
like 2 decades.
2 decades? Are you kidding me? Thank you.
You're
But
not being
no,
mad. Come on, Pixie.
I'm telling you, this is 5 decades of business
So
for
much
me.
experience.
5 decades.
Well, two things that um, the two things that have stood out while you've talked is number one, know your purpose, and how many people go through their entire life without knowing what the purpose of their life is going to be. They just float from day to day, just exist instead of actually driving and being able to look back at their life and go, did I accomplish what my life was intended for? And then the second thing that kind of stuck through the story of raising capital is invest on yourself or invest in yourself, right? Like you had to have the confidence and know that you can pull through what you're going to do and put that investment into what you said you were going to do before you ever got the reward. And so many people want the reward just by saying, well, I'll do this, but I need the help with it. I need this with it. And being able to put that investment in yourself and know, I'm going to make this happen no matter what because I want it to happen. And I can put all my cards in on myself or all my chips at the table on myself and pull this off. And you've got to have that kind of tenacity and conviction to be able, I think, to survive really in business and high level goals to begin with. But then if you're a woman entrepreneur and you're going into a business like yours, like that was your choice, right? It was that or potentially not survive in the industry.
I believe that if you are not committed to investing in yourself that much, you have no business asking anybody else to invest in that. There are a lot of
Absolutely.
people that believe in what they say OPM, and I say, "What is this OPM? OPM? Oh, use other people's money." And I was like, "Okay, that never occurred to me." I'm like, okay, I can leverage, but as a trained financial advisor, I need to make sure that every person that I'm meeting with is in a better position when they leave me than before they met me. And that's just what guides me. And so, as risk aggressive as I am making investment choices for myself, I'm extremely conservative in making sure that I have plan A, B, and C to make sure that anybody who does invest in me is going to be very delighted that they did. And that's really hard. But I would have to say that I have never let anybody down. And that, I don't know, I think that's pretty darn remarkable. There is nobody that would be able to step up and say, I didn't get my money back. In fact, it's the opposite. I have people who write letters that say, she is so worth investing in. She will pay you back early. She will pay you more than what she said she was going to do, and she will over deliver. And that was important for me, right?
That's huge.
And I have those letters everywhere. So I sleep very well at night. It's my own internal competition with myself that is driving me to get to the highest level. I am entertaining me at this point. I was financially able to retire independently numerous times through these careers, but I take everything and I put it all back in because I'm 100% embedding that I'm going to begin with the end in mind, which is a very strong exit that leaves me in a position to be much more um, benevolent to charities, to my community. I'm more fearful of the illusion of the scarcity of time at my age and not being able to give back all that I truly want to give back.
That's incredible. And so that's a great segue, what you were just talking about with all the different things that you are having to balance and that you've had to manage through this process. And I wanted to kind of go into another point that I think a lot of people struggle with. And in today's world, I think everybody wears a handful of hats now. Nobody is the stay-at-home mom anymore that's just getting to focus on that one thing anymore. Nobody's getting to just focus on their one career and just go. You don't have the lifestyle of the 50s and the 1800s and that stuff anymore, right? Like everybody's having to handle lots of different stressors and things going on, but some would be willing, I think, to agree that you have way more going on than some others. And managing that can be difficult. It can take a lot of time. It's a lot of stress. There's a lot of things that you have to be able to balance. What are some of the tools and lessons that you've employed that help you manage all these different companies? You're also a mother of multiple children, right?
9 children, 10 grandchildren. That's a
Man,
lot of
that is,
birthdays every week.
yeah,
Every week, multiple birthdays, anniversaries, weddings. It's crazy.
lots of different factors pulling on you constantly. So how do
And
you
triage
manage
on
that
which
time?
kid is in trouble, which kid need help, who's going here, who's sick. There's just so much. So that is how I handle it. One is triage. I feel like um, what is most needed in the moment is what gets my attention. I also have grown over the decades to have a lot of distinctions. One of them being that time management is not the management of time. I mentioned before the scarcity of the illusion of the scarcity of time, as if time was some defined thing. I definitely have a lot more energy than most people. Okay, that thank God for that. I'm Italian, and I got the Italian side of my family genes that are just the little old lady, my grandmother, 104, running around still, buried probably 8 of her kids before she passed, and just having that energy. So I'm lucky that I got that energy, and it scares me every morning when I wake up. I put my big toe on the floor to say like, is it still there? Do I feel a pulse? I'm so afraid. Oh my gosh, what if one day I wake up as a couch potato? I'm like, what will happen to everything? And I'll just think, I don't want to do it anymore. So I always worry about running out of energy, but energy is neither created nor destroyed, right? It simply transfers form. So I stay in motion, not manage the time. I stay in motion. And it's your relationship with time. So I used to make myself crazy with a to-do list, and I would never go to sleep because until I got the to-do list checked off, I was insane because I knew the next day my to-do list was going to be twice as long and I would have leftover from the day before. So no matter what it took, I stayed up until I finished my to-do list. And then I had a distinction, as I like to call them. And the distinction was throw away your to-do list. I was like, what? Throw away the to-do list. How does that change your life if you no longer have a to-do list? So I'm like, okay, I'm hearing what my angel's talking to me. I'm like, I threw away my to-do list and I developed a new perspective, which is there is no way I'm going to get done in any day, any given day, all that I wanted to get accomplished. But I'm going to walk in with the impression that I'm going to get done way more than I ever expected I could get done in the next year. And so now I'm not coming from this space of scarcity. I'm operating from a space of abundance because when you move your needle to one day and 24 hours to a year, you are free. You are free to grow, to roam, to manage. And so many of those things come into play, and they're all vertically and horizontally integrated. The things end up taking care of themselves. So, time management is not the management of time, it is about your relationship with the concept of time.
It's powerful. It's deep. It's very deep.
And the second thing that I had to accept about the whole work balance thing is to accept that it doesn't exist. It doesn't.
I love it.
It's impossible. I mean, the universe doesn't even work that way. It comes in waves, right? And if you just go with the flow, as opposed to another distinction I think about, you have big rocks and big pebbles in your life, and then you have smaller rocks, and then you have grains of sand. They will all fit in together. If you put if you fill the sand up first in your bucket, there's no room to add the smaller pebbles, the medium pebbles, and the large boulders. But if you attack the large boulders and fill your bucket with that, and then try to introduce all the grains of sand, there's lots of little crevices for it all to fall into. So I don't think about balance anymore. I think about waves and compartments to fit things in.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree with that, and I think that um, I mean, obviously for business owners or people that have a dream, or entrepreneurs, etc. Um, People that have a massive thing that they want to accomplish, right? Whether it's a community impact or something like that. I mean, I think everybody kind of grasps that concept within that world that like you're not going to have that balance. But I think even on an employee level to some extent, and just in general life, the world doesn't operate anymore in that perspective of here we've got. I also don't think it necessarily operates in the perspective like you're going to work 80 hours every week. Like it just doesn't work that way, right? But I think it's a matter of giving your all in the moment, right? Being conscious of your moment, being focused on what you're actively working on, striving, accomplishing your goal, and then moving on to the next thing, right? And making sure that you work in time for yourself, right? It's not so much a balancing of like, well, I'm only working X number of hours today or this week, or I'm only doing this trip or whatever. It's a matter of constantly flowing through those waves, right?
Mhm.
Like these couple of weeks, hey, we're pumping, right? We're putting in, the 12 or 13-hour days, man. It's a busy time right now, but hey, in a month or two, like we're gonna take off. We're gonna slow down a little bit. We'll go have some fun, and we'll refresh and replenish, and you come back in and attack it again because the world it's moving so quickly that if you're not in it all the way and
Yeah.
you're not pushing, it just passes by you.
This is why it's so important to identify purpose versus passion. Right? Passion comes and goes, it flares and wanes. You're going to burn out. You're going to lose your passion. You're going to question why you're even doing these things. Actually, passion comes from the Latin root passio, which means to suffer. Passions of the Christ. Like we didn't start using passion
Mm.
together with purpose until I forget the name of the book that came out. It was like 1975, where the introduction of follow your passion. We didn't used to say that. Passion means to suffer. So it's really go back to, if you know what your purpose is, then it doesn't matter what your workload looks like. It doesn't matter if you lose a job. It doesn't matter if you become a sanitation engineer, or if you become a doctor or a rocket scientist, or try your hand at self employment. It just doesn't matter if you're staying true to your purpose. And also, your grading scale changes because now it's like, well, was I on brand? Was I, like you say, right? Are you on brand? Am I on purpose? If I'm on purpose and I took this little detour and I tried something out, it's not about success or failure. It was, I was on purpose. It's like a whole different grading scale. And it opens, it gives you the freedom, it eliminates the filters and the restrictions to go and be who you were meant to be on the planet.
Yeah, that's incredible. So I hope that people have definitely taken some points out of this because I know that I have. There's so much to kind of unpack here and process through this episode. If you wouldn't mind, kind of paint a picture of what's going on with Pixie now and what's next.
So the big thing for me is I'm entering into a realm that I have not experienced before. I did on the back end. So when I was at American Express and IDS Financial Services, this is again going back to the early 80s, I was part of a team that helped to take Duracell public. So, and I've been on many mergers and acquisitions, and I've spent my life helping to raise capital and raising capital for myself. What I have not done, and what I'm so excited about doing right now, is going public. And it's been an incredible experience learning over the last couple of months. I'm so completely engrossed in understanding the variances of, first of all, fortunate enough to be in a position that I can go public. So mastered all the checklist of getting to be looked at as an
Yeah, it's a
SEC
huge
qualified
deal.
business. It's a very big deal. Deciding if I'm going to go OTC, if I'm going to do NASDAQ, what that's going to look like. Now having audited financials, becoming the first female to take a brewery distillery public. There's
Wow.
very few public distilleries in the world today. There's very few public breweries. There's zero hybrid brewery distilleries, and there's zero female hybrid brewery distilleries. So taking that to be the first person, now we're moving out of the first woman and into being the first person to do these things. I was the first person to take the $1 trillion alcohol industry to the blockchain and introduce this industry to Web3 by creating the first NFT in the spirit space with the first barrel of bourbon ever made in South Carolina. That was another learning curve, right? And that just happened 2 years ago. I've come so far in 2 years. In fact, I have a book, number one bestseller on Amazon, by the way. Should do a plug. Yeah. It's called Alphabet Soup by Pixie Paula. It is the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s of NFTs and other blockchain acronyms. Every page on that book is an aha moment. I did such incredible research. It took me over a year and a half to write. And to do a book on technology while technology is changing like this, by the time I would get to one chapter, I'd have to go back and rewrite a chapter because the updates in technology were just, they're happening at the speed of light. So I am so excited about being the first person to open up the space and carry this. And now taking the company public puts me on a global, global marketplace with, every pun intended again, the opportunity for my investors to be liquid. You don't have that in private equity placements. You can't, you could do crowdfunding or do things like that, but there's no liquidity. There's no vehicle for you to sell your stock and buy something else. Going public lets me tell my story, lets people come in and say, we're excited to see what she's going to do next. And then if they get bored or they need liquidity because they're sending a kid to college or someone's getting married or whatever, they can sell their stock. So I'm really excited about the lessons that I'll be able to teach people, the conversations I'll be able to have, the exciting news that's going to come out of this. And being a public CEO is like, I'm just so excited about
That's
this.
incredible. And, as the person getting to interview, it's remarkable to sit here and get to hear these things and know that not only am I interviewing Pixie Paula, friend, mother, and accomplished entrepreneur, but future first woman public CEO of a distillery,
Yes.
right? Published author, bestseller. And I think as I look to kind of wrap up and put one word that would describe Pixie, I think it's pioneer. And that word gets loosely used so much in the industry. But I think that if they were to put a picture next to the definition, I think it would be your picture. You truly are that.
Hmm.
So I thank you so much for your time today, and I hope that people will listen to this, go buy the book, right?
Yes.
Whenever the stock goes public, check it
Yes.
out for sure, go vet it, and hopefully make an investment if it's right for you. It's not investment advice, by the way. I am not an investment advisor. I feel like I should throw disclaimers in
Good
there somewhere, right?
disclaimer.
So we wrap up today's episode. Uh, Thank you again for tuning in. Looking forward to our next guest as well. Thank you so much for coming on,
Absolutely
Pixie.
delighted.
Remember, listeners, that in the face of adversity, there is always the potential for growth, resilience, and success. Join us every Monday as we continue to explore inspiring stories of overcoming challenges to help you thrive in your journey of life. Thanks.